What Jimmy Chalmers want to propose is exclude those debts so consumers can increase their borrowing power to purchase a property and get a bigger loan. Is this responsible? No, it isn't. And I still remember these finance editors from channel 7, 9, even channel 10 during the COVID periods when rates were 2, 2.5%, 3%. And they actually said, watch out when you engage into a mortgage broker because their goal is to get you the highest loan possible so they can earn more commission. Good day everyone, I'm your host Tony Xia and thanks for joining me on another episode of The Mortgage Chat. And I'm pissed off because our mate Jimmy Chalmers has decided and proposed to all the lenders out there in the market to exclude HECS debts from borrowing power calculations. And what I mean by this is, let's say for example you got a HECS debt, you're paying a repayment every month. What Jimmy Chalmers want to propose is exclude those debts so consumers can increase their borrowing power to purchase a property and get a bigger loan. Is this responsible? No, it isn't. And we actually have finance people from news medias, morning shows to say, hey, do you know what? It's actually a good idea because these debts are going to get paid off anyway down the track. So why don't we just exclude them so these consumers can borrow a bit more to purchase a property for a bit more expensive due to borrowing power issues? Well, do you know what? Every debt in this world gets paid down anyway. So why don't you exclude all those debts as well? Why are you excluding HECS debt, which is no difference to other debts outside, just to increase your borrowing power? This is actually quite irresponsible for these finance gurus and finance editors from the news and even Jimmy Chalmers to even try to propose this, right? Because you're essentially overextending the capabilities of these consumers to be able to meet the debt obligation. And I still remember these finance editors from channel 7, 9, even channel 10 during the COVID periods when rates were 2, 2.5%, 3%. And they actually said, watch out when you engage into a mortgage broker because their goal is to get you the highest loan possible so they can earn more commission. And now the table is flipped, right? Because these finance editors and even Jimmy Chalmers want you to borrow more money. Okay, so they try to make us look bad before, but look at it now, the table's turned, right? And today's episode is purely just to talk about HECS and how it's going to affect your borrowing power based on what Jimmy Chalmers has proposed. Okay, so now let's first talk about what is actually HECS. Now, for people that don't know what HECS is pretty much a loan that you've obtained from getting an education in Australia, essentially. Back in the days, call it 40s, 50s, 60s, even maybe even 70s, or maybe even 80s, to be honest with you, education after high school was actually for free. Going to uni was actually for free. But as time progressed, any education after high school actually started being charged, right? So as an example, I went to uni after high school. My course was for 3 years and we've done 2 semesters every year. So there were 6 semesters, but every semester we've done 4 subjects. And those subjects cost anywhere between $1,000 to $2,000 or even $2,500 sometimes. My HECS bill at the end of my course was around $28,000-$30,000. So HECS is only payable once you reach up to a certain amount of income. So I think back then when I started working, I was on $45,000 until I started paying HECS, right? But remember, as your income increases, just the percentage of HECS you have to repay back increases as well. And you can find that threshold in the tiered percentage on the ATO portal. But remember, the balance that is outstanding on your HECS, you have to pay interest on it. The government actually charge you interest on it as well, right? Which is what we call indexation. So for example, if my balance is $30,000 left outstanding at the end of financial year and the government charged me 5%, the HECS balance will go from $30,000 up to $31,500, example. Okay, so essentially how it works is you pay it down throughout the year, then at the end of the financial year, you'll get charged a bit of interest at the remaining balance. Okay, so that's how HECS generally works. So now I want to show you how HECS actually affects your borrowing power at 3 different income levels. So everybody, I actually have a whiteboard in front of me right now. So if you're just listening to this podcast, just jump into the YouTube video and have a quick look if you really want to, okay? So the example I have here is a couple, does have HECS, have no other debts, and they're on $75,000 each, all right? So at $75,000, the HECS repayment is actually at 3.5% of that income, which is around $218.75 per month each, okay? So based on that, with HECS, their borrowing power is actually around $675,000 as a loan. Now, if I exclude the HECS from that, their borrowing power increases to around $730,000. So there's going to be a slight increase on borrowing power just from excluding the HECS. So the next level I have is $100,000. At $100,000, you're paying 5.5%, okay, on HECS repayments, so which works out to be about $458.33 per month each. So the borrowing power is actually around $890,000 as a loan. Without HECS, it can jump up to $1 million. So you can actually see there's actually a big jump in borrowing power right there by about $110,000. And that's because it's such a big repayment. So at $125,000 income, your HECS repayment is actually at 7.5%, which works out to be about $781.25 per month. So your borrowing power with HECS is at 1.1 mil, but if I exclude the HECS, it actually jumps up to about $1.3 million, which is around $200,000 difference. So you can actually see here with different income levels, the difference between HECS and no HECS changes a lot when your income increases because the HECS repayments actually increase a fair bit. Because as you can see here, at $75,000, HECS and no HECS, the difference is only around $55,000. And you can see here, at $100,000, the difference is around $100,000, $110,000. And $125,000, the difference between the borrowing power is actually around $200,000. So those are the big difference right there. It makes a big difference when you're on a higher income. So that's why I made Jimmy Chalmers want lenders to exclude the HECS debts from the client's borrowing power because it allows them to get a bigger loan. Now, is that responsible? Fuck no. It's actually quite irresponsible for Jimmy Chalmers to even propose that. And I'll tell you why. So firstly, how can you ignore a debt that you have to repay back every month and actually gets taken out of your salary before it hits your bank account? So for example, $500 comes out of my bank account every month for HECS repayments, right? So you're essentially asking the lenders to ignore this $500 repayment so you can get a bigger loan. And we are pretending that $500 that you're saving from HECS can pay for this repayment. But the thing is, you're still going to be short on cash flow, right? Because if I'm allocating this $500 that was meant to be for HECS, that I have to pay every month into this home loan repayment, then who's going to take care of that HECS repayment? I'm short $500 a month on that HECS repayment. So, right, and guess what? That HECS repayment gets taken out of your salary before it even hits your bank account. So if I'm short $500 to repay this mortgage repayment right here, I'm going to be short. I'm going to be in arrears. I'm going to default. Someone's in trouble. Okay? And the person that's going to be in trouble is you, the consumer. And secondly, the biggest hurdle is getting ASIC to even approve this. Okay? So under the National Consumer Credit Protection Act 2009, that is overlooked by ASIC, that takes charge of ensuring the licensee complies with responsible lending. So what this means is no consumer should engage and enter into a credit contract that is not suitable for them. And that brings me back to my first point, right? So how can you ignore a debt that's going to come out of your pay every month just so you can get a bigger loan? Okay? There's no difference to someone out there that has a personal loan, a car loan, a credit card, a private debt, right? Because all these loans are going to be paid back anyway, right? So why don't you exclude those debts as well so you can get a bigger borrowing power, And sometimes these car loans, these personal loans are actually cheaper than your HECS repayment. And the term remaining on these car loans and personal loans are probably shorter than the remaining term on your HECS. So why do I find these 2 points so relevant? It's because if you're going to ignore HECS and you, the consumer, is going to go into default because you're in arrears, who's going to take responsible? Is the lenders going to take responsible? Is ASIC going to take responsible? Jimmy Chalmers just wants himself to look good, but without knowing the logistics on the back end, right? He's a treasurer. He should know this is not responsible lending. You cannot ignore one debt, right? And I don't think any lenders out there will ignore any such debt. I don't think ASIC will themselves, okay? So everybody, just for your understanding, I'm not hating on Liberal. I just found what Jimmy Chalmers said about excluding debts to get a bigger loan is quite irresponsible. So please leave a comment below. I'd love to hear what your thoughts are about excluding debts just so you can get a bigger loan. As always, please do not take this as financial advice. I hope you liked this video. I hope to see you in the next episode of The Mortgage Chat. As always, guys, keep safe and I'll see you next time.